something had to die. But it wasn't just that the something had to die. He set it up to where that which dies takes responsibility for what the people of God had done. Now that we have a clearer picture of what God demands, let's go back to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 5:21, if you haven't heard me say it enough this morning. Let's just read this one more time. For our sake. Read this. Knowing what we just looked at in Leviticus, see if the language corresponds. See, let God speak to your heart, knowing the sacrificial system. For our sake, he made him, God the Father made Christ, to be sin when he knew no sin. So that in him, in Christ, we, the church, might become the righteousness of God. What's happening here? What is Paul doing? Very bluntly, Paul was showing us that the Day of Atonement that Leviticus showed us was pointing forward to Christ's sacrifice. The Day of Atonement was not an end in itself. It was a means pointing forward to the end. All the cleansing, all the rituals, all the sin, all the washing, all the sacrifices were pointing to the ultimate bathing, to the ultimate sacrifice, to the ultimate appeasing of sin. There's two specific things that we see in 2 Corinthians 5:21. The first thing that we see is Christ's life. Now, it's interesting. When you read the New Testament, especially in Paul's letters, he highlights the work of Christ by pointing to his death and resurrection. Right? I first reported to you, Christ died and rose from the grave. Right? It's ringing a bell. When you usually read of what Christ has done, it's usually about his death and resurrection. Paul breaks the model here. He changes. He throws a curveball. He doesn't talk about his death and resurrection per se. What he does is he points you to his life. Right? He says, for our sake, he made him, Jesus, to be sin who knew no sin. That has nothing to do with his death at this point. He's telling us about his life. He's telling us that he was perfect. Right? I don't need to speak to the fact that God demands a perfect sacrifice. That's why we can never sacrifice for ourselves. In the language of Malachi, he demands a blemishless sacrifice. What Paul's pointing us to is that Christ was that sacrifice. He knew no sin. The reason for that? If Christ in any way would have known sin, he would have had to die for his own sin. And he could not die for ours. Because if you're going to be made to know sin, you can't already know something. If you're going to be made to know something for the first time, you can't already know it. If Christ knew sin, he would have had to die for his own sin.